Say hello to the internet.
The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the Fairmont ballroom, and I knew my marriage was over. Not because of the glass. Heck, people drop things at fancy corporate galas all the time. But because of what my wife Madison whispered to her boss, David Cross, as she bent to clean it up. "Don't worry about Alan. He'll be out of the picture soon enough. I'm Alan Foster, 42 years old, and apparently invisible to my own wife." Standing there in my rented tuxedo, watching Madison flirt with her CEO like I didn't exist, I realized I'd been living in a fool's paradise for months, maybe years. The Drake Hotel's crystal ballroom glittered around us, filled with Chicago's tech elites celebrating another record quarter for Madison's software company, Nexus Solutions. Ice sculptures melted slowly under warm lights, and waiters glided between clusters of executives discussing stock options and merger rumors. Madison looked stunning in her black Versace dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, back when she still pretended to love me. "Alan!" Rick Martinez appeared at my elbow, my oldest friend, and the only person here who didn't work in tech. His private investigation business kept him grounded in reality, unlike the rest of us floating in venture capital dreams. "You look like someone just told you Bitcoin crashed to zero." "Worse," I muttered, watching Madison laugh at something David whispered in her ear. "I think I'm about to become a divorce statistic." Rick followed my gaze. David Cross stood 6'2" with silver hair and the kind of confident smile that came from never being told no. At 50, he'd built Nexus from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire, and apparently decided my wife was his next acquisition. "How long?" Rick asked quietly. "I'm not sure. Maybe 6 months? The late nights, the business trips to conferences that don't exist, the way she flinches when I touch her." I took a long sip of bourbon. I've been coding myself into denial, but the signs are all there. Madison's laugh carried across the room, bright and musical. She was networking, as always, working the crowd with practiced efficiency. Jessica Chen, her marketing director, leaned in to whisper something that made both women glance in my direction and giggle. Tanya Williams from HR joined them, followed by Priya Patel from accounting. Madison's inner circle, the corporate gossip crew who knew everything about everyone. "Maybe you're overthinking," Rick started. A spotlight suddenly blazed to life on the small stage at the front of the ballroom. David Cross walked up to the microphone, tapping it twice. The conversations died down as 500 guests turned their attention toward him. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate Nexus Solutions' most successful year yet." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. "But I have a special announcement that makes this evening even more meaningful." My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming before David opened his mouth again. "Madison Foster, would you please join me up here?" The crowd murmured with interest as Madison walked toward the stage, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She looked radiant under the spotlight, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile bright enough to power the hotel. She didn't look at me once. David took her hand as she stepped onto the stage. "This incredible woman has been my vice president of operations for 3 years, and she's transformed our company culture. But tonight, I want to ask her to transform something else." He dropped to one knee. The ballroom erupted in gasps and excited whispers. Someone behind me said, "Oh my God, is he really doing this?" I felt like I was watching it happen to someone else, like I was floating above my own body. David pulled out a ring box. Even from across the room, I could see the diamond was massive. "Madison, I know you're married to that programmer guy, but let's be honest. When's the last time he made you feel alive? When's the last time he surprised you, challenged you, made you feel like the queen you are?" The crowd laughed, actually laughed. At me, at my marriage, at the fact that I was standing right there watching my wife's boss propose to her in front of 500 people. "So, here's my question," David continued, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Will you dump your boring, broke husband and marry me instead?" The laughter got louder. Someone shouted, "Say yes!" Madison's friends were recording everything on their phones, huge grins on their faces like they were watching the best romantic comedy ever made. Madison took the microphone. Her voice was steady, confident. "David, you know I've been unhappy for a long time. Alan's a nice guy, but nice doesn't pay for Versace dresses or vacations in Tuscany. Nice doesn't build empires." She looked directly at me for the first time all evening. "Yes, David, I'll marry you." The crowd exploded in cheers and applause. David slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply, dipping her like they were in some Hollywood movie. Cameras flashed everywhere. I stood frozen, my bourbon glass trembling in my hand. Jessica Chen appeared next to me, grinning maliciously. "Don't look so shocked, Alan. We've all known about them for months. Madison said you were too dense to figure it out on your own. She said you'd probably just code yourself a new wife," Tanya added, and they both dissolved into giggles. I set my glass down on a nearby table and walked toward the exit. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody even noticed I was leaving except Rick, who caught up with me in the hotel lobby. "Alan, wait. I'm fine," I said, though we both knew I wasn't. "I just need some air." The December wind cut through my tuxedo as I stood on Michigan Avenue, watching taxis and Ubers navigate the evening traffic. My phone buzzed with text messages, probably people who'd seen videos of the proposal online already. Social media moved fast these days. "You want to talk about this?" Rick asked, lighting a cigarette. "What's to talk about? My wife just got engaged to her boss in front of half of Chicago's tech community. I'm pretty sure the situation speaks for itself." "What are you going to do?" I thought about that question as we waited for my Uber. What was I going to do? Madison thought I was boring and broke, too dense to figure out her affair. She thought I was some pathetic programmer who'd just roll over and accept public humiliation. She was about to learn how wrong she was. "I'm going to give her exactly what she deserves," I said finally. The Uber pulled up, and I got in without looking back at the hotel. Through the rear window, I could see the ballroom's warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, my wife was probably still basking in congratulations and champagne toasts, celebrating the end of our marriage like it was the best thing that had ever happened to her. She had no idea what was coming. My penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan from the 40th floor, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture that Madison had chosen during happier times. Now it felt like a museum of my own stupidity, filled with expensive reminders of how thoroughly I'd been played. I loosened my bow tie and walked to my home office, where 6 monitors displayed real-time market data, cryptocurrency prices, and the financial dashboard that tracked my actual net worth, something Madison had never bothered to understand. She thought I was broke because I drove a 5-year-old Honda and wore jeans to work. She had no idea that my early investments in Bitcoin and Tesla had made me independently wealthy, or that the boring programming job she mocked was actually a consulting contract that paid me more in a month than most people made in a year. But she was about to find out. I opened my laptop and logged into my brokerage account. Madison and I had joint ownership of several investments, the penthouse, some mutual funds, and most importantly, a significant stake in Nexus Solutions that I'd acquired during their Series B funding round. Madison knew about the investments but had never paid attention to the details. She assumed they were worth maybe a few $100,000. The actual value was $37.2 million. I started with the easy stuff. Joint checking account, closed, funds transferred to my personal account. Joint savings, same. Credit cards where I was the primary holder, canceled. The penthouse mortgage, which was in my name only, I called the bank and had Madison removed as an authorized user. Then I got to the fun part. My Nexus Solutions shares represented 12% of the company. Not enough for controlling interest, but more than enough to cause serious problems if I decided to sell, which I did, all of it. At 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night, I placed a market order to dump every single share first thing Monday morning. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and texts that I'd been ignoring. But now I was curious. 43 missed calls, mostly from Madison. 67 text messages from various numbers. The voicemails were entertaining. Madison's voice grew more frantic with each one. "Alan, where are you? We need to talk." "Alan, this is ridiculous. Call me back." "Alan, I know you're upset, but you're being childish. Just call me." "Alan, what the heck did you do to our bank accounts? Call me right now." The text messages were even better. Madison's friends had clearly been coaching her because the tone shifted from dismissive to panicked to desperate. "Madison, look, tonight got out of hand. We can work this out." "Madison, David was drunk. It wasn't real." "Madison, Alan, I can't access any of our accounts. This isn't funny." "Madison, answer your phone." Jessica Chen had sent me a message too. "Madison's freaking out. What did you do?" I poured myself a scotch and sat in my leather chair, looking out at the city lights. Chicago looked beautiful at night. All those people living their lives, most of them probably happier than I'd been for the past year. Tomorrow, when the markets opened, Madison and David's perfect evening was going to become a very expensive mistake. My phone rang. Madison again. This time I answered. Hello, sweetheart. How's your engagement party going? Alan, what did you do? Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I cleaned up some loose ends. You know how it is. Boring programmer stuff. The bank said you closed our accounts. You can't do that without my permission. Actually, I can. My name was primary on all of them. Yours was just added for convenience. But don't worry, I'm sure David can cover your expenses now that you're engaged. This is insane. You're acting like a child. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, the child was the one who got engaged to her boss in front of 500 people without bothering to divorce her husband first. But hey, what do I know? I'm just the boring, broke programmer, right? I could hear voices in the background. David and her friends, probably trying to figure out damage control. We need to talk, Madison said. I'm coming over. No, you're not. I changed the locks 20 minutes ago, and the security desk has instructions not to let you up. You can't keep me out of my own home. It's not your home. It never was. The deed is in my name only. I bought it before we got married, remember? Back when you thought my money was romantic instead of boring. The line went quiet except for Madison's breathing. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The panic was gone, replaced by something colder. You have no idea what you're starting, Alan. David has lawyers, real lawyers, not some legal aid garbage. We'll destroy you. Good luck with that. Oh, and Madison, you might want to check the Nexus stock price Monday morning. I have a feeling it's going to be an interesting day for everyone at your company. I hung up and turned off my phone. There was a knock at my door, 3 short raps, then 2 longer ones. I smiled. That was Tony's signal. Tony Castellanos had been the night doorman in my building for 6 years. Ex-military, smart as heck, and completely invisible to people like Madison who thought service workers were just part of the furniture. He'd seen everything that went on in this building, including David Cross visiting my wife when he thought I was out of town. Evening, Mr. Foster. Tony stepped inside, glancing around the penthouse. Heard you had some excitement tonight. Word travels fast. Your wife showed up about an hour ago with that CEO guy and 3 other women. Made quite a scene when security wouldn't let them up. She was screaming about how you'd stolen her money and locked her out illegally. What did you tell them? Tony grinned. I told them that according to our records, Mrs. Foster was never on the lease or the deed, so she has no legal right to access the unit. The CEO guy got all puffed up, started threatening to call his lawyers. I told him he was welcome to call anyone he wanted, but he'd be doing it from the sidewalk. And then they left. But not before the blonde one, Jessica something, started recording everything on her phone, probably posting it online already. I walked to my laptop and checked social media. Sure enough, Jessica had posted a video to her Instagram story. Madison crying in the lobby while David paced angrily in the background. The caption read, "When your husband has a psychotic break, #drama alert, #crazyex." Tony, how would you feel about earning some extra money? Depends what you need. I need eyes and ears. Madison's going to be desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she talks to, every move she makes. Tony nodded slowly. You planning something illegal, Mr. Foster? Nothing illegal, just making sure I'm prepared for whatever comes next. In that case, I know a few guys who might be interested in helping out. Ex-military, ex-cops, people who know how to stay invisible and keep their mouths shut. Perfect. Set it up. After Tony left, I made myself another drink and opened my laptop again. Madison thought she could humiliate me publicly and walk away with half of everything I'd built. She thought I was too nice, too boring, too weak to fight back. She was about to learn the difference between nice and naive. I opened a new browser window and started researching divorce lawyers. Not just any lawyers. The best, most ruthless, most expensive attorneys in Chicago. The kind who ate people like David Cross for breakfast and sent the bones to their ex-wives. My phone, which I'd turned back on to check for any urgent messages, buzzed with a new voicemail. Madison again, but this time she sounded different, scared. Alan, please. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But this is getting out of hand. David's stock options are tied to the company's performance, and if you dump your shares, it could trigger a sell-off that destroys everything we've all worked for. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs. Please, just call me. We can figure this out like adults. I deleted the message without finishing it. Madison was right about one thing. Hundreds of people might lose their jobs when Nexus stock tanked on Monday. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I hadn't asked David to propose to my wife at a company event. I hadn't asked Madison to humiliate me in front of half of Chicago's business community. They'd made their choice. Now they could live with the consequences. Monday morning arrived with the kind of brutal January wind that made Chicago feel like the surface of Mars. I sat in my office, watching 6 monitors display the opening bell chaos as my Nexus Solutions shares hit the market like a financial avalanche. The stock opened at $42. By 9:45 a.m., it had dropped to $38. By 10:15, it was down to $34 and falling fast. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since 9:30. Rick arrived with coffee and bagels, settling into the chair across from my desk like he was watching a particularly entertaining movie. Jesus Christ, Alan, you really did it. I told them I was going to give Madison exactly what she deserved. The financial news sites are calling it a mystery sell-off. Nobody knows who's dumping shares, but the rumors are flying. Some people think it's a hostile takeover attempt. I pulled up the Chicago Tribune's business section on one of my monitors. The headline read, "Nexus Solutions stock plummets amid mysterious mass sell-off." The article speculated about everything from insider trading to corporate espionage, but nobody had connected the dots back to Saturday night's gala yet. "Speaking of rumors," Rick said, "I did some digging over the weekend. You want the good news or the bad news first?" Hit me with the bad news. Madison and David have been having their affair for 8 months, not 6. They've got a secret apartment in River North that David pays for. Very cozy, very expensive. Madison's been telling people for weeks that she was planning to leave you after the holidays. And the good news? Rick grinned. David's been embezzling from the company to pay for their little love nest. Nothing huge, maybe $50,000 here and there, buried in consulting fees and travel expenses, but it's enough to destroy him if it comes out. How do you know all this? David's personal assistant is a woman named Carol Martinez, my cousin. She's been watching him cook the books for months, keeping copies of everything because she knew it would eventually blow up. She hates David's guts, calls him a walking HR disaster waiting to happen. My computer chimed with a new email. Madison, sending from her personal account since her work email was probably being monitored now. "Alan, we need to talk immediately. David's lawyers are prepared to file an injunction to stop you from selling more shares. This is destroying innocent people's lives. Please call me." I forwarded the email to Rick. "Innocent people? That's rich, coming from someone who's been planning to divorce me for months. What's your next move?" I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder. Tony's been busy. Madison spent Sunday afternoon at Jessica Chen's apartment, and apparently they had some very interesting conversations. I pressed play. Madison's voice came through clearly, slightly muffled, but perfectly understandable. I can't believe he actually did it. I mean, I knew Alan was bitter about the engagement, but I never thought he'd be stupid enough to tank his own investments. Jessica's voice. "How much money are we talking about?" "David thinks it's maybe 30 or 40 million. Alan never told me the exact amount, but it has to be huge if it's moving the stock price this much." Jesus. So he was never actually broke? Apparently not. God, I feel like such an idiot. All this time I thought I was trading up from some loser programmer to a real man with real money, and it turns out Alan was richer than David all along. So, what are you going to do? David's talking about having Alan committed. You know, like a psychiatric hold. He says if we can prove Alan's having a mental breakdown, we can get control of his assets and stop him from destroying the company. Rick whistled low. "That's some serious crap, Alan. They're talking about having you institutionalized?" "Apparently. But Tony got more than just audio." I opened another file on my computer. Photos filled the screen. Madison and David in the River North apartment, kissing on the balcony. Madison and David at expensive restaurants I'd never heard of. Madison and David shopping for engagement rings 3 weeks before the gala. Carol took these. Carol, Tony, and a couple of other people who are very motivated to see David Cross get what's coming to him. Turns out, when you treat the service industry like they're invisible, they see everything you do. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is David Cross. We need to meet. Today. Name the place." I showed Rick the message. "What do you think?" "I think David Cross is about to have a very bad day." I typed back, "Millennium Park, Crown Fountain, 1 hour. Then I opened my laptop and started uploading files to a private server. Photos, audio recordings, financial documents showing David's embezzlement, and a detailed timeline of Madison and David's affair. Everything organized, dated, and backed up in multiple locations. "Insurance?" Rick asked. "Insurance. If they want to play hardball, I want to make sure I have enough ammunition to level the playing field. We drove to Millennium Park in Rick's car, a beat-up Ford Explorer that looked like it had survived several small wars. The Crown Fountain was mostly deserted in the January cold, just a few tourists taking photos and some joggers who were either very dedicated or completely insane. David was already there, pacing near the fountain like a caged animal. He'd traded his gala tuxedo for an expensive gray suit, but he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, the kind of desperate energy that came from watching your empire crumble in real time. "Foster," he called out as we approached. "We need to talk." "So talk." "Not here. Too public." "I like public. Public keeps things civilized." David glanced around nervously, then stepped closer. "You're destroying everything I've built. Hundreds of jobs, millions in investor money, years of work. I'm selling my own stock. Last time I checked, that was legal. Don't play dumb with me. You know exactly what you're doing." "You're right. I do know exactly what I'm doing. The question is, do you?" David's face flushed red. "This is about Madison, isn't it? You can't handle the fact that she chose a real man over some basement-dwelling code monkey?" That's when I smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since Saturday night. "David, can I ask you something? How long have you been embezzling from your own company?" The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" $53,000 in fake consulting fees, $28,000 in non-existent travel expenses, the apartment in River North that you're paying for with company funds. Should I keep going? David took a step back. "You're fishing. You don't have anything." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of Carol's photos. David signing a check made out to Cross Consulting Services, a company that existed only on paper. "Your assistant is very thorough. She's been documenting everything for months, just waiting for the right moment to use it." Carol would never... Carol Martinez, 42 years old, single mother of two, been working for you for 3 years while you treat her like furniture. She makes $38,000 a year while you spend more than that on your girlfriend's apartment. How do you think she feels about that? David looked like he was going to be sick. "What do you want? I want you to understand something very clearly. You humiliated me in front of 500 people. You stole my wife and made me look like a fool, but that was just the opening move." I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look up at me. "I'm going to destroy you, David. Not just your stock price, not just your company. You, personally. I'm going to take apart your life, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but a cautionary tale about what happens when you mess with the wrong, boring programmer." "You're insane." "Maybe, but I'm insane with $37 million and a very detailed understanding of how to ruin someone's life using completely legal methods. So here's what's going to happen next." I pulled out a business card and handed it to him. "That's my lawyer's number. He'll be filing a civil suit against you for embezzlement, fraud, and alienation of affection. The embezzlement alone is enough to send you to prison for 10 years. You can't prove... I can prove everything. Photos, documents, witness testimony, financial records. Your own assistant is prepared to testify against you." David stared at the business card like it was a death sentence, which, in a way, it was. "But here's the thing," I continued. "I'm not unreasonable. You want to marry Madison? Fine, marry her. But you're going to do it as a broke, disgraced ex-CEO with a criminal record. And every time you look at that engagement ring, you're going to remember that you paid for it with money you stole from your own company." I turned to walk away, then stopped. "Oh, and David? Madison's planning to have me committed so she can control my assets. You might want to ask yourself what she'll do to you when your assets disappear." Rick was grinning as we walked back to his car. "That was beautiful, man. Did you see his face when you mentioned the embezzlement? We're just getting started." My phone buzzed with another text from Madison. "Whatever you think you're doing, it needs to stop. Now." I typed back, "See you at the next gala. Oh wait, you won't be invited." Then I turned off my phone and started planning phase 2. The Nexus Solutions headquarters occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in the Loop, all glass and chrome and inspirational posters about synergy and disrupting paradigms. I'd been here dozens of times for Madison's company parties, always feeling like an outsider in my jeans and polo shirts while everyone else wore suits that cost more than most people's cars. Today was different. Today, I wore a $3,000 Tom Ford suit and carried a briefcase that contained enough evidence to turn David Cross's corporate empire into a smoking crater. Mr. Foster? The receptionist looked nervous. I'm sorry, but Mr. Cross isn't taking meetings today. That's fine. I'm not here to see David. I'm here for the emergency board meeting. Her confusion was almost comical. I'm sorry, what meeting? I handed her a legal document. As a 12% shareholder in this company, I'm invoking my right to call an emergency board meeting regarding financial irregularities and executive misconduct. The meeting starts in 30 minutes. The receptionist stared at the document like it was written in ancient Greek. I need to call someone. You should probably call the board members. They'll want to be here for this. While she frantically dialed numbers, I took a seat in the lobby and watched the chaos unfold. Employees hurried past, whispering to each other about the stock price, which had continued its freefall throughout the week. Some of them recognized me as Madison's husband, but nobody approached. I was radioactive now, the mysterious force that was destroying their company. Madison appeared 15 minutes later, flanked by Jessica Chen and two lawyers I didn't recognize. She looked polished and professional in a navy blue suit, but I could see the stress and the tight lines around her eyes. Alan, what the heck do you think you're doing? Hello, Madison. You look lovely today. How's married life treating you? We're not married yet, and you know it. Right, because you're still married to me. Awkward. One of the lawyers, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, stepped forward. Mr. Foster, I'm James Shaw, representing Mrs. Foster and Nexus Solutions. This harassment needs to stop immediately. Harassment? I'm exercising my legal rights as a shareholder. Unless you're suggesting that shareholders shouldn't be allowed to question executive conduct. You're manipulating the stock price for personal revenge. That's market manipulation, which is a federal crime. I opened my briefcase and handed him a folder. Actually, what's a federal crime is embezzling company funds to pay for extramarital affairs. But I'm sure you already knew that. Shaw opened the folder and went pale. Photos of David signing fraudulent checks, bank records showing transfers to the River North apartment, receipts for expensive dinners and jewelry that had been charged to company accounts. Everything Carol Martinez had been collecting for months. Where did you get these? Does it matter? The question is whether Nexus Solutions Board of Directors wants to address this before the SEC starts asking questions. Madison grabbed the folder from Shaw's hands, flipping through the photos with growing horror. These are fake. You doctored these somehow. Madison, I'm a programmer, not a graphic designer. Besides, your boyfriend's assistant took most of these photos herself. She's prepared to testify about everything she's seen. Carol's been documenting David's crimes for 8 months. She has enough evidence to put him in federal prison for a decade. The only question is whether the board wants to handle this internally or wait for the FBI to get involved. The elevator dinged and 5 people in expensive suits emerged. The Nexus Solutions Board of Directors, summoned by legal obligation and probably scared out of their minds about what they were about to hear. Margaret Chen, the board chairwoman and Jessica's aunt, approached with the kind of measured calm that came from decades of corporate warfare. Mr. Foster, this is highly irregular. So, is having your CEO embezzle company funds to finance an affair with a married employee, but here we are. I spent the next hour laying out everything I discovered. David's embezzlement, the fraudulent consulting fees, the company credit cards used for personal expenses. The board members' faces grew more grim with each revelation. David himself didn't show up until halfway through my presentation, bursting into the conference room like he was storming an enemy fortress. This is BS! Foster's making it all up because he can't handle losing his wife to a better man. David, Margaret Chen said quietly, perhaps you should sit down. I'm not sitting down. This is my company. I built this from nothing, and I'm not going to let some bitter ex-husband destroy it with fake accusations. I slid a bank statement across the table. Is this fake, David? Because it shows a $50,000 transfer from the company account to Cross Consulting Services, a company that exists only on paper and has never provided any actual services? David stared at the document, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and finally resignation. That was a legitimate business expense. For what services? Strategic consulting. From yourself? You paid yourself $50,000 to consult with yourself? The room was dead silent. Even Madison looked horrified. Margaret Chen cleared her throat. David, I think you need to retain counsel immediately. This meeting is adjourned pending a full forensic audit of company finances. You can't do this to me! David slammed his hand on the table. I made you all rich. This company was nothing before I took over. And it'll be nothing again if we don't act quickly, said Robert Kim, the board's treasurer. David, you're suspended immediately, pending the results of the audit. Security will escort you out. David looked around the room desperately, like he was expecting someone to come to his defense. His eyes landed on Madison, who was staring at the bank statements with the expression of someone who'd just realized she'd bet everything on a losing horse. Madison, tell them! Tell them this is all fake! Madison looked up slowly. David, did you really steal money from the company? I didn't steal anything. I borrowed some funds for temporary personal use. I was going to pay it back. With what money? Your salary? Your stock options that are now worthless because the company's stock price is in free fall? We can fix this. We can get married, combine our assets. What assets? Madison's voice was rising. Alan cleaned out all our joint accounts. The penthouse is in his name. My stock options are worthless if the company goes bankrupt. And now you're telling me you're a thief? Security arrived before David could respond. Two large men in blazers who looked like they'd handled this kind of situation before. David went quietly, but not before giving me a look that could have melted steel. After he left, the room stayed quiet for a long moment. Finally, Margaret Chen spoke. Mr. Foster, I assume you have demands. Just one. I want David Cross prosecuted to the full extent of the law. No plea bargains, no golden parachutes, no quiet resignations. He committed crimes, and he should face the consequences. And in exchange, I'll consider not selling the rest of my shares. The company might survive if you act quickly to distance yourselves from David and implement proper financial controls. Margaret nodded. We'll need to discuss this with our legal team, but I think we can work something out. As the board members filed out, Madison stayed behind. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the collapse of everything she'd thought was solid. You destroyed him, she said quietly. No, Madison, he destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone found out about it. What about us? What about our marriage? I closed my briefcase and stood up. What marriage? You got engaged to another man in front of 500 people. You planned to have me committed so you could steal my money. You've been cheating on me for 8 months. I made mistakes. You made choices, and choices have consequences. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and Madison, you might want to start looking for a new job. Something tells me Nexus Solutions won't be needing a VP of operations anymore. The elevator ride down felt like descending from a great height. Through the glass walls, I could see the city spreading out below, millions of people going about their lives, most of them probably happier than I'd been in months. But for the first time since Saturday night, I felt something like satisfaction. David Cross was finished. Madison was facing the reality of what she'd thrown away. And I was just getting started. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick. How did it go? I typed back, Phase 2 complete, ready for Phase 3. The war wasn't over, but I was winning. The Chicago Athletic Association gym occupied the top floor of a historic building overlooking Millennium Park. It was the kind of place where corporate executives worked out their aggression on expensive equipment while making deals that would reshape entire industries. I joined 6 months ago, back when I thought my biggest problem was Madison's late nights at the office. Now I was here for a different kind of workout. You sure about this? Rick asked, adjusting his boxing gloves. He'd been teaching me to fight for the past 3 weeks, ever since David Cross had started making threats about handling the Alan Foster problem through non-legal channels. I'm sure. David's ego won't let him back down from a public challenge. He'll show up. I'd sent David a simple message through Carol Martinez. If you want to settle this like men instead of lawyers, I'll be at the CLA gym tomorrow at 6 p.m. Boxing ring. No tools, no lawyers, no witnesses except whoever shows up to watch. It was a calculated risk. David was bigger than me, younger, and probably in better shape. But he was also desperate, humiliated, and stupid with rage. Desperate, humiliated, stupid people made mistakes. The gym was busier than usual for a Thursday evening. Word had gotten around about the exhibition match between the mysterious stock manipulator and the disgraced CEO. About 30 people had shown up to watch, including several Nexus Solutions employees who probably should have been looking for new jobs instead of watching their ex-boss get his ass kicked. Madison arrived at 5:45, flanked by Jessica Chen and Tanya Williams. She looked tired, older somehow, like the stress of the past few weeks had aged her in fast forward. She'd been staying at Jessica's apartment since I'd changed the locks on the penthouse, and according to Tony's surveillance reports, she'd been spending most of her time on the phone with divorce lawyers who kept giving her bad news about her chances of getting any of my money. "Alan, this is insane," she said, approaching the ring where I was warming up. "David's going to hurt you." "Why do you care? I thought you wanted to marry him." "That was before everything fell apart." "Before you found out he was a thief, you mean?" Madison flinched. "I made mistakes. I know that, but this isn't going to fix anything." "It's not about fixing anything. It's about finishing what David started at the gala." David arrived at exactly 6 p.m. because of course he did. He was the kind of man who was never late, never unprepared, never anything less than perfectly in control. Except now his company was in ruins. His reputation was destroyed, and federal prosecutors were building a case against him for embezzlement and fraud. He looked good, though. Expensive workout clothes, professional boxing gloves, the kind of confident swagger that came from years of believing he was untouchable. He was also about 3 inches taller than me and probably 30 pounds heavier. "Foster," he called out as he climbed into the ring. "Ready to get your A kicked in front of your ex-wife?" "She's not my ex-wife yet. We're still married, remember? Which makes you a homewrecker and a thief." The crowd murmured appreciatively. David's face flushed red. "You destroyed my company." "You destroyed your company. I just made sure everyone found out about it." We touched gloves in the center of the ring, and I could see the hatred burning in David's eyes. This wasn't about boxing for him. This was about revenge, about restoring his damaged ego, about proving he was still the alpha male who could take whatever he wanted, which was exactly what I was counting on. The first round was brutal. David came at me like a man possessed, throwing wild haymakers that would have knocked me unconscious if they'd connected. But rage made him sloppy, and Rick had taught me well. I stayed mobile, let him exhaust himself, and landed quick jabs whenever he left himself open. By the end of the first round, David was breathing hard, a cut above his left eye trickling down his cheek. I was tired, but intact. "You're running like a coward," he panted during the break. "I'm fighting smart, but then you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The second round was when I started talking, really talking. "You know what the funny thing is, David?" I said, circling away from another wild swing. "Madison never loved you. She loved your money." David lunged forward, leaving himself wide open. I caught him with a hard right cross that snapped his head back. "And now that your money's gone, what do you think she's gonna do?" Another jab, this one splitting his lip. "You think she's going to stick around while you're in federal prison?" "Shut up." David threw a combination that missed by 6 inches. "She's already talking to divorce lawyers, you know. Well, not divorce lawyers, since you two were never actually married. But she's definitely looking for her next sugar daddy." I could see Madison in the crowd, her face pale with embarrassment. The people around her were recording everything on their phones, capturing every word for posterity. David was getting sloppier, more desperate. He threw a wild right hook that left his entire left side exposed. I stepped in and drove my fists into his ribs 3 times in rapid succession, doubling him over. "The apartment in River North?" I said, backing away as he tried to clinch. "She's already moved out. Didn't want to be associated with a criminal." That wasn't true, but David didn't know that. He roared with fury and charged forward like a bull, swinging wildly. I sidestepped easily and caught him with an uppercut that lifted him off his feet. David went down hard, landing flat on his back in the center of the ring. The referee started counting, but I could tell David wasn't getting up. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. He was conscious, but finished. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Several people were live streaming the fight on social media, which meant it would be all over the internet within hours. David Cross, the mighty CEO who'd humiliated me at the gala, knocked unconscious by the boring programmer he'd stolen from. I helped David to his feet when he finally came around. He was wobbly, but standing, his face a mess of cuts and bruises. "This isn't over," he mumbled through swollen lips. "Yes, it is. Your company's gone, your reputation's destroyed, and you're going to prison. It's been over since the moment you decided to propose to my wife in public." I climbed out of the ring and walked over to Madison. She looked like she was about to cry. "Are you happy now?" she asked. "Getting there." "What do you want from me, Alan? You've destroyed David. You've humiliated me. You've taken everything. What more do you want?" I thought about that question as I toweled off the sweat and the mess David had left behind. What did I want? Revenge? I'd gotten that. Justice? David would be going to prison soon enough. My money back? I'd never lost it in the first place. I want you to understand something, Madison. You thought I was boring because I didn't need to prove myself by stealing other people's wives or embezzling money or making grand gestures in front of crowds. You thought I was weak because I treated you with respect instead of like a trophy to be won. I stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear me. But strength isn't about how loud you can yell or how much money you can steal or how many people you can impress at a corporate gala. Real strength is about what you do when someone tries to destroy everything you've built. And you just found out exactly how strong I really am. I walked away without looking back. Behind me, I could hear David being helped out of the ring by his remaining friends, and Madison crying quietly while Jessica tried to comfort her. My phone was already buzzing with notifications. The fight video was going viral, shared thousands of times across every social media platform. Boring programmer was trending on Twitter. Someone had already made a meme out of David's knockout, but the best notification came from my lawyer. Federal prosecutors officially filed charges against David Cross, embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. He's looking at 10, 15 years minimum. I smiled and headed for the exit. Phase 3 was complete. Time for the finale. 3 months later, I was sitting in my penthouse office watching the sunrise over Lake Michigan when Tony called with the news I'd been expecting. "They're coming up," he said. "Madison, David, and 2 other people I don't recognize. They overrode the elevator with some kind of electronic device. Security's been disabled. How long do I have?" "Maybe 5 minutes. You want me to call the police?" "No, let them come." I'd been preparing for this moment since the night of the gala. Madison and David were desperate now, backed into a corner with no legal options left. David's trial was set to begin in 2 weeks, and his lawyers had made it clear that his only hope was a plea bargain that would still send him to prison for at least 5 years. Madison had been blacklisted from every major tech company in Chicago, her reputation destroyed by her association with David and the viral videos of our confrontations. Desperate people did desperate things, and I was ready for them. I activated the security system I'd installed after changing the locks. Not the building's standard setup, but a custom system designed by Rick and his ex-military friends. Cameras in every room, recording everything to off-site servers. Motion sensors that would trigger automatic uploads to social media accounts. And a few other surprises that Madison and David were about to discover. The elevator dinged, and I heard voices in the hallway. Madison's voice, high and strained. "The cameras are off, right? You're sure?" A man's voice I didn't recognize. "Everything's disabled. We've got maybe 20 minutes before building security notices the system's down." They were wrong about the cameras, but I didn't correct them. My front door exploded inward with a crash that shook the entire apartment. David burst through first, followed by Madison and 2 men in dark clothing who looked like they'd stepped out of a bad action movie. One of them was carrying what looked like a crowbar. The other had some kind of electronic device that was probably supposed to disable my security system. "Alan!" David shouted. "We need to talk!" I stayed seated at my desk, hands folded calmly in front of me. "Hello, David. Madison. I have to say, breaking and entering is a new low, even for you two." "You destroyed our lives," Madison said, stepping forward. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled like she'd been sleeping in them. "Everything we worked for, everything we built, you took it all away. I didn't take anything that belonged to you." "Bees!" David was practically foaming at the mouth. "You manipulated the stock price. You planted fake evidence. You turned everyone against us." "The evidence wasn't fake, David. You really did embezzle money from your own company. The FBI confirmed that when they arrested you." One of the men in dark clothing, the one with the crowbar, stepped forward. "Enough talking. Where's the money?" "What money?" "Don't play dumb," Madison said. "We know you have millions hidden away. Offshore accounts, cryptocurrency, whatever. We want half of it." "And if I refuse?" David smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then we make sure you can't refuse. Marcus here used to work for some very unpleasant people. He knows how to make people cooperate." I nodded thoughtfully. "I see. So this is a robbery?" "This is justice," Madison said. "You owe me half of everything legally. I'm your wife." "Actually, you're not." I pulled a document from my desk drawer and held it up. "Divorce papers, filed 3 weeks ago. You've been served, Madison, but apparently you've been avoiding the process servers." Madison stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "You can't divorce me without my consent." "In Illinois, I can. especially when I have evidence of adultery, fraud, and now breaking and entering. David lunged forward, but I was ready for him. I pressed a button on my desk, and suddenly the apartment's sound system came to life with a recording of their conversation from 30 seconds earlier. "Don't play dumb. We know you have millions hidden away. We want half of it. And if I refuse, then we make sure you can't refuse. Marcus here used to work for some very unpleasant people." The recording played on a loop, echoing through the apartment. David's face went white as he realized what had happened. "You recorded us?" "I'm recording everything. Right now, this conversation is being live-streamed to about 50,000 people on various social media platforms. Say hello to the internet, everyone." Marcus raised his crowbar threateningly. "Turn it off." "I can't. It's automated. The moment you broke down my door, the system activated. Everything you've said and done in the past 5 minutes has been broadcast live to the world." Madison was looking around frantically, finally noticing the small cameras mounted in the corners of the room. "This is illegal! You can't record people without their consent!" "Actually, in Illinois, I can record anyone who breaks into my home. It's called the Castle Doctrine." David was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. "This is a setup. You planned this whole thing?" "Of course I did. Did you really think I'd just sit here defenseless while you sent thugs to rob me?" The second man in dark clothing, the one with the electronic device, was staring at his equipment with confusion. "Boss, something's wrong. The cameras aren't disabled. None of the security systems are down." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we disabled the building's security, but this guy has his own system. Everything's still recording." David spun around to face me. "You son of a witch. How long have you been planning this?" "Since the night of the gala. You humiliated me in front of 500 people, David. Did you really think I'd just forget about that?" Madison stepped forward, her voice desperate. "Alan, please. We can work this out. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can start over." "Start over?" "Madison, you got engaged to another man at a corporate party. You planned to have me committed so you could steal my money. And now you've broken into my home with armed criminals to rob me. What exactly are we supposed to start over from?" I was confused. I thought David could give me things you couldn't. "Like what? A criminal record? A destroyed reputation? A front row seat to a federal trial?" The live stream chat was exploding with comments. Thousands of people were watching Madison and David's meltdown in real time, sharing it across every social media platform. #Gala Revenge was trending worldwide. Marcus was getting impatient. "Enough of this. Tell us where the money is, or things get unpleasant." "The money's in various investment accounts, all of which are protected by federal law and monitored by the SEC. Even if I wanted to give it to you, which I don't, it would take weeks to liquidate and transfer." "Then we wait." "No, you don't." I pressed another button on my desk, and suddenly the apartment sprinkler system activated, drenching everyone except me. At the same time, the floors became slippery as soap dispensers hidden throughout the room began spraying industrial-grade detergent everywhere. Marcus slipped and went down hard, his crowbar clattering across the floor. The second man tried to grab onto a table for support, but it was on wheels and rolled away from him. David and Madison were sliding around like they were on an ice rink, completely unable to maintain their footing. "What the heck is this?" David shouted, trying to wipe soap out of his eyes. "Home security system. Rick's idea, actually. He said if someone breaks into your house, you want to disable them without actually hurting them too badly." The apartment door burst open again, but this time it was Rick and 3 Chicago police officers. They surveyed the scene. 4 soaking wet intruders slipping around on a soapy floor while I sat calmly at my desk, completely dry. "Alan," Rick said, grinning, "you know how to throw a party." "Officers," I said, standing up and straightening my tie, "I'd like to report a break-in. These 4 individuals forced their way into my home and threatened me with violence. Everything's been recorded and live-streamed as evidence." The lead officer, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, pulled out her handcuffs. "Madison Foster, David Cross, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, attempted robbery, and criminal conspiracy." As they were being led away in handcuffs, Madison looked back at me one last time. Her makeup was ruined, her hair was plastered to her head with soapy water, and her expensive clothes were completely destroyed. She looked nothing like the polished, confident woman who had accepted David's proposal at the gala. "This isn't over, Alan." "Yes, it is." After everyone left, I sat back down at my desk and opened my laptop. The live stream had been viewed over 2 million times in the past hour. News outlets were already picking up the story. David Cross and Madison Foster, The couple who'd become internet famous for their dramatic gala engagement had just provided the world with an even more dramatic finale. My phone rang. It was my lawyer. "Alan, I just watched the live stream. Please tell me you planned all of that." "Every second of it." "Good, because David Cross just violated the terms of his bail by committing another felony. He's going to prison today, not in 2 weeks. And Madison's looking at serious jail time for armed robbery." "How serious?" 5 to 10 years minimum, more if the prosecutor decides to make an example of them. I hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Madison and David were sitting in jail cells, finally understanding the consequences of their choices. Their engagement had lasted exactly 3 months and 2 days, from the gala to their arrest. It would probably take longer than that for their criminal trials to conclude. My phone buzzed with notifications. Hundreds of friend requests, thousands of messages, interview requests from news outlets around the world. The boring programmer who'd been humiliated at a corporate gala had become an internet legend, the man who'd orchestrated the most elaborate and public revenge in social media history. But I wasn't interested in fame. I'd gotten what I wanted, justice. Madison and David had learned that actions have consequences, that you can't destroy someone's life without facing repercussions, and that underestimating people is a dangerous game. I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat back down at my desk. Outside, Chicago was waking up to another day, millions of people going about their lives, most of them probably happier than I'd been for the past year. But for the first time since the night of the gala, I felt genuinely content. The war was over. I'd won. And Madison was right about one thing. I really wasn't boring anymore.